The first thing you need to understand about humans is that they are absolutely, completely, utterly insane. And I should know. I've been hunting one for the past 6 cycles, and she's made my life a living nightmare. My name is Keth Voren, 3rd Talon of the Hegemony Intelligence Division, and until recently I thought I was pretty good at my job. 43 successful extractions, 12 deep cover operations, and not a single target had ever escaped my grasp. Then Command assigned me to track down Lieutenant Zara Blackheart, and suddenly my perfect record looked about as impressive as a broken plasma conduit. The briefing should have been my first warning. Admiral Grixnelm himself descended from high command to deliver it personally, his 6 eyes twitching with what I now recognize as barely controlled panic. Target designation: Human 7-7 Alpha, he rasped, his mandibles clicking nervously. Also known as Lieutenant Zara Blackheart, Terran Defense Corps, Special Operations Division. Age: 23 standard cycles. I nearly laughed. 23 cycles? I'd been tracking criminals and insurgents since before this human was even spawned. Sir, with respect, surely a single young human doesn't warrant silence. Grixnelm's voice could have shattered reinforced tritanium. This single young human has single-handedly disrupted 17 of our operations, eliminated 32 of our agents, and somehow convinced 3 separate colony worlds to join the Terran resistance. She is not to be underestimated. The hologram flickered to life, and I got my first look at my target. Small by human standards, maybe 1.6 meters tall, with short-cropped auburn hair and eyes the color of a dying star. She looked ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of human you'd pass in a corridor without a second thought. Don't let her appearance fool you, the Admiral continued, as if reading my thoughts. Lieutenant Blackheart was orphaned at age 7 when we glassed her homeworld of New Meridian. She was found 3 days later in the ruins, clutching a dead Hegemony trooper's weapon and covered in the blood of 6 others. Now that got my attention. 6 trained Hegemony soldiers, killed by a 7-year-old human child? Impossible. The Terran military took her in, Grixnelm went on. Raised her, trained her, molded her into the perfect weapon. She knows our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. Worse yet, she's teaching others. The hologram shifted, showing surveillance footage from various raids. I watched in growing disbelief as this small human female moved through our forces like death itself. She was fast, impossibly fast, but that wasn't what made my scales crawl. It was the way she seemed to anticipate our every move, turning our own strategies against us with surgical precision. Your mission is simple, the Admiral concluded. Find her, capture her if possible, eliminate her if necessary, but stop her before she spreads her knowledge to more of her kind. Simple, right? I should have requested a transfer to waste disposal instead. The trail led me to Kepler Station, a ramshackle trading post on the rim of contested space. The perfect place for a human insurgent to disappear, assuming she was trying to disappear at all. Something told me Zara Blackheart wasn't the hiding type, that I'd been there all of 6 hours when the shooting started. The cantina erupted in chaos as plasma bolts seared through the air, but I could see the pattern immediately. This wasn't random violence, it was tactical, precise, surgical. Someone was cutting through the Hegemony patrol that had been stationed there, and they were doing it with the kind of efficiency that made my combat implants itch with anxiety. Through the smoke and confusion, I caught a glimpse of auburn hair and that unmistakable human silhouette. She moved like liquid lightning, rolling between cover points and returning fire with a modified pulse rifle that definitely wasn't standard issue. Every shot found its mark. Every movement had purpose, but what really caught my attention wasn't her skill, it was what she was protecting. A cluster of civilian refugees, mostly humans but a few other species mixed in, huddled behind an overturned table while she systematically dismantled my fellow Hegemony operatives. "Stay down," she barked at the civilians, her voice carrying that peculiar human mix of authority and genuine concern. "I will get you out of this." And she did. By the time the station's security forces arrived, 12 Hegemony soldiers lay dead or unconscious, and Lieutenant Zara Blackheart had vanished with her protected charges through a maintenance shaft that shouldn't have been large enough for anyone but a cleaning drone. I found the aftermath fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. She'd known exactly where to hit each trooper to disable their armor's weak points. She'd anticipated their flanking maneuvers before they'd even begun them. Most disturbing of all, she'd done it while protecting a group of non-combatants, adding an extra layer of complexity that should have gotten her killed. Instead, she'd waltzed out of there like she was taking a casual stroll. The maintenance shaft led to the station's lower levels, a maze of service tunnels and abandoned storage bays that would have taken me days to map. But humans, I was learning, had this annoying habit of making the impossible look routine. I found her 3 levels down, tending to an injured refugee child, a young Corvin whose parents had been killed in a recent Hegemony raid. She'd set up a makeshift medical station using supplies that she'd somehow requisitioned from the station's emergency cache, and was carefully cleaning a plasma burn on the kid's arm. "It's okay, Jex," she was saying, her voice gentle in a way that seemed impossible for someone who just killed a dozen trained soldiers. "This is going to sting a little, but then you will be good as new." The child, Jex, apparently, looked up at her with those wide, trusting eyes that young Corvins were famous for. "Are the bad soldiers gone, Lieutenant Zara?" "For now," she replied, applying a biopatch with practiced ease. "But we need to get you and the others somewhere safe. There are more coming." She was right, of course. I could already hear the distinctive whine of Hegemony drop ships approaching the station. Backup had arrived, and they wouldn't be as easy to outmaneuver as a simple patrol. That's when she looked directly at me. I thought I'd been perfectly concealed behind a stack of cargo containers, but those human eyes found me instantly. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the dimly lit chamber. Then she smiled, not the predatory grin of a killer, but something almost amused. "Keth Voren, 3rd Talon of Hegemony Intelligence," she said casually, never taking her eyes off me. I wondered when they'd send someone competent. The fact that she knew my name and rank should have been impossible. My identity was classified at the highest levels. But then again, I was beginning to understand that impossible was just another word humans used to describe Tuesday. "You are a difficult person to find, Lieutenant," I replied, stepping out from my hiding place. My weapon remained holstered. Something about the situation told me that drawing it would be both pointless and probably fatal. "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you found me just fine." She finished treating the child's wound and stood slowly, keeping her hands visible but ready. "Question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Before I could answer, the station shuddered as the first dropship docked. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors above us. At least 2 full squads, probably more. We were about to be very, very outnumbered. "You could surrender," I suggested, though even as I said it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. Her laugh was like music with knives in it. "Oh, Keth, you really don't understand humans at all, do you?" That's when the real fun began. The first squad came down the main corridor, 12 fully armored Hegemony shock troopers moving in perfect formation. They should have been unstoppable in the confined space of the maintenance level. Instead, they walked straight into what I can only describe as a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Zara had apparently spent her time down here doing more than just treating wounded refugees. The corridor was a maze of improvised traps and kill zones, each one perfectly positioned to exploit the natural instincts and trained responses of Hegemony soldiers. The first trap was simple but effective, a gravity mine rigged to a motion sensor. The lead trooper's foot hit the trigger, and suddenly half the squad was pinned to the ceiling while the other half tried to figure out what had gone wrong. That's when the real carnage started. She came at them from 3 directions at once, or at least that's what it looked like. Later analysis would show that she'd rigged a series of mirrors and holographic projectors to create multiple false targets. But in the moment, it seemed like she'd learned to teleport. Pulse rifle fire erupted from the shadows, each shot precisely aimed at the weak points in their armor. Within seconds, the gravity-pinned soldiers were unconscious, and the others were scrambling for cover that didn't exist. "Impossible," I breathed, watching her work. No single person should have been able to coordinate such a complex ambush while simultaneously protecting a group of civilians and maintaining perfect situational awareness. That's what makes it fun, she called back, her voice echoing from somewhere in the darkness. Another soldier went down, his weapon flying from nerveless fingers. You guys always assume there's only one way to solve a problem. The second squad learned from the first squad's mistakes, which is to say they didn't walk blindly into the same traps. Instead, they walked blindly into completely different traps that Zara had prepared for exactly that contingency. Humans, I was discovering, had this terrifying ability to think several steps ahead while simultaneously adapting to changing circumstances. It was like playing chess against an opponent who could see the entire board while also making up new rules as they went along to be why the time the dust settled, 24 of the Hegemony's finest lay unconscious or worse in the maintenance tunnels of Kepler Station. The refugees were safe, and Lieutenant Zara Blackheart was standing in front of me with her weapon lowered, looking for all the world like she'd just finished a light workout. "So," she said, holstering her rifle with casual efficiency, "are you going to try to arrest me now? Or can we talk like civilized beings?" I stared at her for a long moment, my brain trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Everything I thought I knew about tactical doctrine, about numerical superiority, about the basic laws of physics, had just been turned upside down by a single human female who wasn't even breathing hard. I said carefully, "I'd like to hear what you have to say." Her smile was brighter than the explosion that had started this whole mess. "Good choice, Keth, because we need to talk about what's really going on here." That's when she told me about the real war, the one the Hegemony High Command didn't want their soldiers to know about, the one where humans weren't just fighting for their own survival, but for the freedom of every species the Hegemony had conquered or enslaved. "You see, Keth," she said as we walked through the now quiet corridors, the refugees following at a safe distance. "Your people made one crucial mistake when they attacked Earth, which was, you assumed we were just another species to be conquered. But humans, we are not really wired for giving up, especially when someone threatens our kids." She gestured to young Jex, who was walking beside her with the absolute trust that only children could show. Every species the Hegemony has crushed had something to lose. Homeworlds, governments, military structures. But humans? We have been practicing the art of making do with what we have for thousands of years. I was beginning to understand, and the realization was more terrifying than any weapon she could have pointed at me. "You're not trying to restore what was lost," I said slowly. "You are building something new. Now you are getting it." Her grin was positively predatory. The Hegemony destroyed our worlds, scattered our people, tried to break our spirit. But all they really did was give us a reason to get creative. And that, I realized with growing horror, was exactly what made humans so dangerous. They didn't just adapt to impossible circumstances. They thrived in them. 3 days later, I found myself doing something that would have gotten me executed for treason just a week ago. Sitting in a hidden rebel base, drinking something humans call coffee, and listening to Lieutenant Zara Blackheart explain why the Hegemony was doomed. "The thing is, Keth," she said, leaning back in her chair with that infuriating human casualness, "your whole empire is built on fear and overwhelming force. Works great against species that think in terms of traditional warfare. Around us, the rebel base hummed with activity. Humans worked alongside Corvins, Zealothi, and even a few members of my own species who'd apparently decided that centuries of oppression were enough. It was unsettling. The Hegemony had always maintained that different species couldn't cooperate effectively. Clearly, the Hegemony had been wrong about a lot of things. But humans," Zara continued, taking a sip of her coffee and grimacing slightly, "we have spent our entire evolutionary history being the underdogs. We are persistence hunters, Keth. We don't give up. We just keep coming until whatever we are chasing either dies of exhaustion or makes a mistake." Captain Rex Morrison, a grizzled human veteran with scars that told stories I didn't want to hear, nodded from across the table. "She's not exaggerating. Back on Earth, our ancestors used to hunt mammoths, creatures 50 times their size, by literally chasing them until they collapsed from exhaustion. 50 times their size. I repeated weakly. And they hunted them for food. Sometimes, Zara said with a shrug. Sometimes just because they were there and we were bored. The casual way, she said, it made my blood run cold. No wonder the high command was terrified. So what's your endgame? I asked. You can't possibly think you can defeat the entire hegemony with guerrilla tactics and stolen equipment. Zara's smile was the kind that made seasoned interrogators wake up screaming. Who said anything about defeating the hegemony? Before I could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout the base. Red lights flashed as automated systems announced incoming threats in at least 6 different languages. Contact. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Came the voice of Lieutenant Diana Cross, the base's communications officer. It's a full battle group. Admiral Thexmiron commanding. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Thexmiron wasn't just any admiral. He was the hegemony's premier xenocide specialist, the monster who'd personally overseen the glassing of 17 worlds. If he was here, it meant the High Command had decided that subtle operations were over. How many ships? Zara asked, already moving toward the command center with that liquid grace that made her so dangerous. 37 capital ships, plus escorts. They're surrounding the entire system. I felt my scales begin to molt from stress. 37 capital ships represented enough firepower to reduce this entire moon to component atoms. Even if every being in the base was a trained soldier, which they weren't, we'd be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Well, Zara said cheerfully, looks like it's time for the graduation exam. Graduation exam? I squawked. Did I forget to mention? This isn't really a rebel base. Her grin was absolutely terrifying now. It's a training facility. Every person here, human, Corvin, Zealothi, even a few defectors from your species, they're all students in what we like to call the Blackheart Academy of Asymmetric Warfare. The pieces began falling into place with horrifying clarity. The refugees I'd seen her protecting weren't random civilians. They were potential recruits. The seemingly haphazard layout of the base wasn't poor planning. It was a carefully constructed training ground. Even my own capture had been part of the curriculum. You have been teaching them, I whispered. Teaching them to fight like humans. Teaching them to think like humans, she corrected. Fighting is just one application. Captain Morrison activated the base's tactical display, showing the incoming fleet in all its terrifying glory. Admiral Thexmiron is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's demanding unconditional surrender. Let him demand, Zara said, studying the fleet positions with the focused intensity of a predator selecting prey. Diana, patch me through to all ships. Full broadcast. Zara, what are you doing? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I really didn't want to know. She keyed the transmitter and spoke in perfect high hegemony, her voice carrying the formal cadences of military protocol. Admiral Thexmiron, this is Lieutenant Zara Blackheart, Terran Defense Corps. I understand you have come to discuss terms. The response was immediate and predictably furious. Human filth. There will be no terms. Surrender immediately, or watch as I turn your pathetic moon into cosmic dust. Counteroffer, Zara replied calmly. You withdraw your forces immediately, or I demonstrate why the High Command is right to be afraid of us. Thexmiron's laughter was like grinding metal. You dare threaten me? I command the largest battle group in hegemony space. What could you possibly do against Keth? Zara interrupted, turning to me with that unsettling smile. Would you like to see how humans really fight when they are properly motivated? Before I could answer, she activated a series of controls I hadn't even noticed. Suddenly, the base's passive sensors were showing something that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing. The hegemony fleet wasn't alone in the system. Ships began decloaking around the battle group. Not dozens, but hundreds. Sleek human vessels that had somehow remained hidden despite active scanning. Captured hegemony ships flying under new colors. Alien designs I'd never seen before, representing species I didn't even recognize. You see, Admiral, Zara continued conversationally. While you were busy hunting one human, the human was busy teaching hundreds of others. And those hundreds were teaching thousands. And those thousands, the tactical display lit up like a festival celebration as more and more ships revealed themselves. The Hegemony battle group, for all its impressive firepower, was suddenly outnumbered 3-1. Impossible d'exmirer snarled. Our intelligence showed no significant rebel presence in this sector. Your intelligence was correct, Zara replied. There wasn't a significant rebel presence here. There was a significant human presence, and we have been very, very busy. That's when young Jex, the Corvin child I'd seen her protecting, appeared at her elbow. Except he wasn't really a child anymore. Or rather, he was a child who'd been taught to think like a human tactician. Lieutenant Zara, he said in his piping voice, all student groups report ready for final examination. Student groups? I managed to croak. Every ship out there, she explained patiently, is crewed primarily by graduates of training programs like this one. We have been establishing schools on every world the Hegemony has conquered, teaching resistance fighters not just how to shoot straight, but how to think tactically, strategically, and most importantly, creatively. The magnitude of what she was describing hit me like a meteor strike. This wasn't just a military operation. It was an educational revolution. Humans hadn't just been fighting the Hegemony. They'd been systematically undermining the very foundations of their power by teaching their victims to fight back effectively. Admiral Thexmiron, Zara said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of command, you have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. After that, my students begin their final exam, and I'm afraid the passing grade requires complete destruction of all Hegemony forces in the system. You are bluffing. But even through the calm static, I could hear the uncertainty in the Admiral's voice. Am I? Diana, please show the Admiral what happened to the 7th Fleet when they refused to withdraw from the Centauri system. The tactical display shifted to show archival footage that made my stomach turn inside out. A Hegemony battle group, not unlike the one currently surrounding us, being systematically dismantled by what looked like a coordinated swarm attack. Ships appearing from nowhere, striking with surgical precision, then vanishing before return fire could be coordinated. The 7th Fleet was destroyed by spatial anomalies. Thexmiron protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The 7th Fleet was destroyed by a graduating class of 43 students, Zara corrected. Multi-species cooperation, adaptive tactics, and the human concept of overkill. Would you like to see what a class of over 300 can accomplish? The silence stretched for long moments. Then, reluctantly, what are your terms? Complete withdrawal from this system and all adjacent sectors. Cessation of military operations against civilian populations in the Outer Rim. And formal recognition of the Independent Species Alliance. The High Command will never agree to those terms. Then the High Command will learn what happens when you threaten our students. Zara's voice dropped to something that could have frozen plasma. 30 seconds, Admiral. I watched the tactical display with fascination and terror as the surrounding fleet began to move. Not attacking, not yet, but positioning themselves with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of months of training and practice. Each ship knew exactly where it needed to be, exactly what its role would be in the coming engagement. 10 seconds, Admiral. This is madness. Thexmiron's voice cracked with something that might have been panic. The High Command will dash 5 seconds. We withdraw. We withdraw. The Hegemony fleet began its retreat procedures with undignified haste, their formation breaking apart as individual captains prioritized survival over military discipline. Within minutes, the most powerful battle group in this sector of space was fleeing toward the hyperspace limit like children running from a nightmare. Class dismissed, Zara announced to the rebel fleet. Excellent work, everyone. Same time next week for advanced interdiction tactics. As the ships began to disperse, many of them re-engaging their cloaking systems, I found myself staring at Lieutenant Zara Blackheart with something approaching religious awe. You have been planning this for years, I said finally. Since I was 7 years old and watched the Hegemony glass my home world, she confirmed. Did you really think we were just going to roll over and die? But how? How did you coordinate something this massive without our intelligence networks detecting it? Her laugh was like summer rain after a drought. Keth, you're thinking like a hegemony officer. Centralized command, rigid hierarchy, official channels. We don't work that way. Captain Morrison activated another display, this one showing a web of communication nodes that seemed to span half the galaxy. Every graduate of our programs becomes a teacher in their own right. They establish their own schools, train their own students, build their own networks. It's not an organization. It's an idea that reproduces itself. A viral concept. I breathe understanding at last. You have weaponized education itself. Now you're getting it, Zara said with approval. The hegemony controls through fear and ignorance. But once people know they can fight back, once they understand that cooperation is stronger than oppression, that knowledge spreads like wildfire. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office on Freedom Station, the unofficial capital of what was now being called the Independent Species Alliance. My official title was Cultural Liaison, though my real job seemed to be explaining to confused hegemony defectors why their entire worldview had been wrong. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Without the threat of overwhelming military force, hegemony control had collapsed faster than anyone thought possible. World after world declared independence, their populations armed not just with weapons, but with the knowledge of how to use them effectively. The final report from the hegemony core worlds came in this morning, Zara announced, entering my office with that same casual confidence she'd always displayed. The High Command has officially requested peace negotiations. Terms: complete dissolution of the hegemony military, reparations for all conquered worlds, and formal recognition of the alliance. Oh, and they want to establish cultural exchange programs. I nearly choked on my coffee. Cultural exchange programs? Apparently, some of their younger generation have been studying human philosophy and tactics through underground networks. They want to learn more about this democracy concept. The irony was delicious. The hegemony, in trying to suppress human influence, had only made it more appealing to their own people. The forbidden fruit syndrome, as humans called it. So what happens now? I asked. Zara settled into a chair, her expression thoughtful. Now we do the hard work. Fighting a war is easy compared to building a lasting peace. But I think we are up for the challenge. You don't think you are getting out of this that easily, do you? Her grin was infectious. The Alliance needs people who understand both sides of this conflict. Besides, you have got a knack for this kind of work. Looking back, I realized that was the moment I truly understood what made humans so dangerous. It wasn't their tactical brilliance, their stubborn persistence, or even their ability to inspire others to fight against impossible odds. It was their absolute, unshakable belief that everyone deserved a chance to be better than they were. The hegemony had raised me to see other species as resources to be exploited or obstacles to be eliminated. But humans? They saw everyone as potential students, potential allies, potential friends. They took a broken intelligence operative who'd been hunting them and turned him into a teacher and diplomat. That's what made them truly terrifying to any system built on oppression. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They converted them. And in the end, that made all the difference. The war was over. The real work of building something better had just begun. And for the first time in my life, I was genuinely excited to see what tomorrow would bring. After all, I've been raised by Earth's military now too. And we never gave up.